The United States Central Command destroyed fortified targets on Qasem Island in southern Iran in the dead of night. Terror in the Gulf. Iran shut down Kuwait International Airport. Are we returning to fighting? An Iranian drone attack hit Kuwait International Airport, caused casualties and shut down air activity in the country, only hours after another round of exchanges of blows between the United States and Iran. And the United States is hardening its positions in the negotiations. Washington is placing a clear red line before Iran and declaring sanctions relief only in exchange for giving up the nuclear program. In addition, the United States is hitting the Revolutionary Guards in the pocket and launching a direct strike on the Iranian money machine. Washington has opened a focused economic attack against one of the most important financial platforms of the regime in Tehran. All the details coming up soon. And today, it turns out that Trump really did call Netanyahu crazy. We will soon bring you what that means. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Shoshani. We are boots on the ground. We bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is July 3rd. Let's begin. Trump is driving the Iranians crazy. The President of the United States changed direction and hardened his positions against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. During the meeting on Friday in the Situation Room, President Donald Trump determined that the Iranian verbal commitments regarding the nuclear issue are not enough. Now, he's demanding an explicit statement from Iran regarding its nuclear program, and especially regarding the uranium that has already been enriched to a high level. Tonight, between Tuesday and Wednesday, the United States military announced that a military operation was carried out against an oil tanker sailing in Qasem Island in Iran. The United States military released footage of a Hellfire missile being launched at the tanker's engine room and published the following statement. United States Central Command CENTCOM updated that as part of the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, a military operation was carried out against an oil tanker flying the flag of Botswana while it was sailing in international waters on its way to Karag Island. It was also stated that the ship's crew ignored repeated warnings and did not obey the instructions of the American forces several times over the last 24 hours. In the end, an American aircraft disabled the vessel by launching a Hellfire missile at the ship's engine room. In response to the disabling of the oil tanker by the United States military, the Revolutionary Guards fired missiles towards Kuwait and Bahrain and claimed that this was a response to the strike on a communications tower on Qasem Island. The drones from Iran hit Kuwait International Airport and caused the shutdown of commercial activity there. Authorities in Kuwait announced that the main passenger terminal was significantly damaged and that several people were injured during the incident. Following the attack, passenger flights were stopped, and the country's national airline announced that suspension of its operations will start now until further notice. The talks between the sides in recent weeks have focused on an attempt to reach an agreement of understandings that would extend the ceasefire, reopen up the Strait of Hormuz, and set a timeline for the continuation of the discussions. A draft formulated last week included a written Iranian commitment not to work towards obtaining nuclear weapons, but did not include concrete commitments regarding the regime's entire nuclear program. President Trump expressed optimism and said that he estimates that Iran will agree to the new terms within a week. However, officials in Washington expressed doubts in light of the internal disagreements within the Iranian regime. Secretary of State Marco Rubio referred to this difficulty and said that at the end of the day, you're negotiating with people who then have to negotiate inside their own system in order to see what they're allowed to give and what they are allowed to agree to. An official news agency in Iran confirmed that the updated draft is under review in Tehran. American officials emphasized that no sanctions relief will be offered and no assets will be unfrozen before Iran fulfills all its commitments. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made clear in a Senate hearing that any sanctions relief for Iran will take place only in exchange for a full concession on the Iranian nuclear program. Rubio denied that a compromise had been offered in exchange for opening the Strait of Hormuz, while Tehran's conventional defense system has been badly eroded and its military has almost been destroyed. In addition, Rubio revealed that there are indications that Iran's supreme leader Mustafa Khamenei is becoming more and more involved in managing negotiations. Khamenei has not been seen or heard in public since he was wounded in the strike in which his father was killed in the opening hours of the war. The American administration tightened the pressure on Iran this week and announced the opposition of board of sanctions against Iran's largest crypto exchange, Nobitex. According to Washington, the exchange allowed the Iranian government and blacklisted state institutions to bypass the Western sanctions. The dramatic move comes after the explosion of how the exchange became a central junction in the parallel financing system, which proceeded hundreds of billions of dollars from Iran's central bank and the Revolutionary Guards. And against the backdrop of the dramatic escalation in the Middle East and the expanding war in the Persian Gulf, the consequences of the confrontation are now directly hitting the pockets of energy customers all around the world. Saudi Arabia, the largest oil exporter in the world, has decided to raise the price of its main type of oil for the Asian markets to a historic record premium. This step comes at a time where Iran is close to an almost complete blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, which is causing turmoil and deep shock in global energy markets, according to a report by the Bloomberg News Agency. And one more thing that followed us this week, the leak about the President of the United States shouting at the Israeli Prime Minister. We asked who leaked it, what was leaked, and what the context was, and now it seems that whoever leaked it managed to take the remarks out of their full context. The President of the United States confirmed that he used a harsh expression towards Benjamin Netanyahu during a conversation between the two about the fighting in Lebanon. But alongside the criticism, Trump emphasized his close relationship with the Prime Minister and said, "I like Bibi very much. I work with him excellently." Look, it seems that the two leaders are very comfortable with each other and know how to work together very well. It's likely that sometimes they have disagreements, and that is natural and logical, especially during wartime. Trump said, "I was a little disturbed by his non-stop fighting in Lebanon." He continued, "We worked very, very well together. I like Bibi very much, and I work with him excellently. I'm a president during wartime. He's a prime minister during wartime in a very important region of the world, and we work very well." End quote. Although Trump said that he is concerned about the possibility that the confrontation between Lebanon and Israel would torpedo the peace agreement with Iran, he noted that he is still optimistic and that an agreement will be reached pretty quickly. And at the same time, Iran's economic oxygen pipeline has been exposed, the one that the United States still cannot manage to block. Through a secret network of oil tankers operating off the coast of Malaysia, the Iranian regime managed this week to sell crude oil to China worth billions of dollars despite American sanctions. Today, we will bring you how it works and have Israel and the Lebanese government found a solution for the Hezbollah terrorist organization? What do you think? So apparently, this is the plan for dismantling Hezbollah. The United States military will train the Lebanese army in order to help it deal with Hezbollah and in practice disarm the terrorist organization, a move that has Israeli support. Sources familiar with the details said that the move does indeed have support here in Israel. An official in the administration in Washington made clear Trump asked to prevent escalation in order not to turn Lebanon into an issue in the negotiations. So we have a lot ahead of us. Well, let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. We are here on boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and about the war against Iran's Revolutionary Guards, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And just a second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button, and most importantly, do not forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts in order to get a view through our eyes of what it's like to live here in Israel during this war. So our senior Middle East correspondent, Mati Shoshani, if Iran is already hitting Kuwait and Bahrain and not only threatening Israel or American ships, are we seeing a transition from an Israel-Iran, an Israel-Iran war to a new Gulf war?
That is a great question, but this is not actually news. If you've really been following what's been happening in the last couple months, from the get-go, the Iranians have used the tactic of harming the friends of the United States to try and pressure the United States. And I'm not talking about Israel here, by the way, although Israel is a friend of the United States. I'm talking about the Gulf states, the countries who trade, who work, who buy weapons from the US. They're the ones who suffered the most from Iran through this war. Who do you want as an example? The United Arab Emirates. They took a strike, or more strikes, in total munitions than Israel did during this war. Kuwait, a semi-friend of Iran, has taken a beating from the Iranians, as have, of course, quite a few other states, including others who are nowhere near being a real friend of the US and are much more closer to Iran, such as Oman, that is close to the Strait of Hormuz area and a close ally on certain cases of the Iranians. But here's what's interesting in this whole conversation. In this last time frame, recent hours, recent days, Iran has slowly upped the tempo of attacks and damage towards targets that are in the Gulf states. And they're doing this for two main reasons. One, because it's an easy target. It doesn't require long-range ballistic missiles, such as reaching Israel, that are, for the most case, also intercepted and therefore less effective. But it is effective in causing fear and putting international pressure on the US to reach an end to whatever we want to call this conflict, the war or an extended ceasefire. Why is this important? This is important because Iran is doing this as a mechanism of pressure. They tried it with economic pressure by closing the Strait of Hormuz. They're trying it with political pressure by targeting these countries and trying to use them to push the US to change policy and to change behavior. And of course, they're trying it once more, now again, with a combination of the two. Strait of Hormuz is closed, so they're squeezing them, they're causing damage to them financially, and therefore they might pressure the US. And now they're launching attacks at them, UAVs and other projectiles, to say, look, we can continue to harm you. Why don't you go and cry to Uncle Sam so they stop the war with us? This is, don't misunderstand their intentions, this is not a war in the Middle East. This is an extension of the conflict with the United States. And everyone is looking to see what the United States is able to do. Let me tell you something. This war is far more complicated from a military perspective than what you imagine. This isn't a medieval war with two armies meeting on one battlefield, clashing and then going back home. They continue fighting. They continue fighting in the sea. They continue fighting in the air. They continue fighting in electronic warfare and, of course, in intelligence and public perception. And this is interesting and this is relevant because right now and in the last couple of weeks, the US has been able to move ships through the Strait of Hormuz, but they're doing it quietly without releasing a whole lot of footage about it on international media. They're doing something else. They are also counter-striking Iranian strikes on ships and Iranian attempts to disrupt traffic or travel through the Strait of Hormuz. They've been eliminating Iranian mosquito boats. They've been targeting, repeatedly, by the way, not a single time, Iranian land-based rocket systems and other munitions, and of course, radar systems to try and prevent them from causing harm or using intelligence to cause harm afterwards to other targets traveling through the area. So this is more complex than just saying Iran is attacking Gulf states. Iran is trying to do what it's done several times, which is use the Gulf states as a pressure lever on the United States. As always, I'm happy to say that President Trump is not someone who's easy to pressure publicly or by military action. Thankfully, it takes more than that to really change public policy. And what we've seen from US forces in the area is a very substantial level of resolute behavior, of resolve to show the Iranians that there's only one way to end this war, and it's on American terms. So yes, once again, it's very uncomfortable for the Gulf states, but this isn't news. The Iranians have done this time and time again. They try to harm other people. They try to disrupt trade. They try to cause damage. Why? They do this because it's their way to try and affect American foreign policy.
And Mati, is the real Iranian threat right now not only missiles and drones, but the ability of the Revolutionary Guards to maintain a secret economic system that continues to fund the war even under blockade?
Yeah, this is definitely the case. The financial war is as much an element of this war as are the ships, the planes, the soldiers, the missiles that are being part of it up till now. Where do we see this? In a very substantial way, the Iranians have entered the financial equation early in the beginning of this war by closing the Strait of Hormuz and using that as a chokehold on both the global economy, but specifically on their neighbors, the Gulf states. But the US retaliated with the same token by closing the Strait of Hormuz on Iranian ships traveling through. This was not at the beginning of the war, but about a month into it. And now things are continuing. We're looking at several recent steps that the Americans have carried out where they're going after Iranian crypto assets around the world. I think I heard someone in the US Treasury, this was earlier this week, state that they've already seized close to $1 billion of crypto wallets from the Iranians. I've also heard today that several Israeli hacker groups have stolen, I think it was in recent days, $80 million of Iranian crypto wallets from them. And of course, it's a probably very complicated process, but this is something that's happening on an ongoing basis. But yes, the financial element is substantial because, and I say this all the time, and I think anyone who follows this topic will say it, you don't end this war by military force. It doesn't end with a bomb. It doesn't end with a bombing mission for a plane or with soldiers on the ground. That's not how this war ends. It ends with an agreement, and an agreement includes the financial component. And finances are key. Iran is a dictatorship. It's a dictatorship that might have elections, but don't get them wrong. They are not elected by the people. They dictate what the people will do. They control them in an authoritarian way in a very, very substantial manner. And because of that, they need cash. They need cash to pay the hundreds of thousands of IRGC and Basij soldiers and enforcers that do their bidding on the streets and scare away anyone who's trying to stand up to the government. They need that to pay for the war machine that is the IRGC. They need that to pay for their proxy mechanism, which is Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and others around the world that they use to try and spread terrorism. They need cash. And the US is going after their cash. By the way, not only the US, also the people we talked about just a second ago, the Gulf states, have publicly said, you know what? We've realized it's not worthwhile being your friends. We know where you're keeping some of your crypto. We know where you're hiding assets through shell companies and corporations. We're coming after them, and we're going to seize them, and we're going to use them to pay for the damages you caused in this war. I think that's both humorous. It's also, well, it's what they had coming. If they're going after the wallets and the cash of these countries, well, they deserve to have the same done to them. And yes, the US using financial tools is important, but it's not new to this war. It's been done in many wars because that's often the ways, or one of the ways you bring down a terrorist entity, by going after their cash, after their pocket, and then making them a little softer to negotiate with.
Mati, if Israel continues to strike Hezbollah while the United States is trying to close an agreement with Iran, has Lebanon become the real test of the question of who is running the Middle East? Washington, Jerusalem, or Tehran?
My sense is that this attempt to try and frame Israeli attacks in Lebanon as something that goes against US policy, I think it's an inaccurate attempt to do so. We're clearly not saying that here on TBN Israel. We're saying that the story is far more complex. One, for those of you who've forgotten, I think most people haven't forgotten yet, there's reports of this very tense conversation that took place regarding Israeli operations in Lebanon between President Trump and Netanyahu. But the main story, and this is happening today, we've heard clarifications from the White House on this topic that said, yes, it was a heated conversation, but of course, the US is committed to the very warm, the very important, the very serious relationship they have with the people of Israel, with the state of Israel, and with the prime minister of Israel, knowing that what's happening in Lebanon is more of a bigger problem. The problem is twofold. One, Lebanon is a country that has a government and an army that don't control their country. Their country, to a great degree from a military perspective, is controlled by Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is not a party or a faction within Lebanon proper, although they do have representation in the government. They are a sign of Islamic radical imperialism in Lebanon that is paid, funded, and trained by Iran, and is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not a representation of the wish, the will, or the desires of the Lebanese people. It's that of the Iranian people. So here's what happened. A couple days ago, a ceasefire is declared. Israel says, okay, if there's a ceasefire, let's slow down the war machine. And we do. And Hezbollah says, you know what this is time for? To go all in. Let's start firing all the drones, all the rockets, all the missiles we have at every target we can get to in Israel. This is hours after this extended ceasefire is declared. And Israel says, come on, guys, this isn't happening. We can't have a ceasefire with the government of Lebanon and then be fighting a war against Hezbollah and just say that we decided not to fight while they're attacking us. And we do go back to fighting against Hezbollah. That's a reality on the ground. You can't ignore it. You can't evade it. You must reconcile with the reality. And the reality is Hezbollah is a terrorist organization who is meant to disrupt the government of Lebanon and fight and weaken Israel. They represent the desire, not of the Lebanese people, but of Iran. And Iran's desire is to prove that the U.S. can't bring an agreement without stopping the war in Lebanon. So it's all circularly connected, but not through Lebanon, through Tehran, through the Ayatollahs, the IRGC, and honestly, whoever's controlling Iran. We're not sure of that yet. And they're the ones controlling it. The relationship between Israel and the United States is strong. The U.S. has immense political and military power. And if anyone can change the political situation on the ground in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza, it is the United States under the leadership of Donald Trump. But sometimes these processes take time. They take nation-building efforts. They take international forces. And Hezbollah doesn't want a ceasefire agreement. They're not that kind of organization. They want to keep fighting. They want to bring harm to Israel, especially now that they see that it serves the interest of Iran, their overlords, their benefactors, their patrons. And because of that, this doesn't represent the fact that the fighting continues in Lebanon doesn't mean that the U.S. is weak. It means that Lebanon is a broken country that needs someone like the U.S. to come in with international aid, with international organizations, and change something substantial in the way that country operates. Look, the Arab Spring and the aftermath of that and Iranian proxy warfare have devastated, they've decimated countries throughout the Middle East, and Lebanon is one of them. Lebanon is a country that has been in various forms of civil war and international war for decades, since before I was born. And because of that, they need something new to be built in that country, and that takes time. That takes stabilizing efforts. That takes IMF grants, International Monetary Fund. It takes World Bank. It takes other countries to come in and to build and to donate and to build infrastructure, and for an army to be rebuilt, and for the people to regain faith in that government. And until that happens, Israel really has to, we have no choice but to fight against Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, until they stop threatening the people of Israel. The best way to do that would be to have the Lebanese army fighting against them.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani. This definitely helped us better understand what we're dealing with. And to all of you, continue to spread the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button. We are here, TBN Israel, reporting twice a day about what's happening in Israel, in the Middle East, and whatever you need to know about this region. We invite you to take part in something real, something rooted in the land and in our hearts. The Rebuild Israel campaign continues, bringing life back to Israel's north. So along Israel's northern border, an area marked by war, displacement, and loss, we are planting an apple orchard, not as a symbol for a single moment, but as part of a long-term commitment to rebuild what was damaged. This orchard is more than agriculture. It creates jobs for local families. It helps communities return and rebuild. And it sends a clear message to the people of Israel: you are not alone. When you donate, you're not just giving, you are rebuilding. Your support puts trees in the ground, restores livelihoods, and transforms land scarred by war into a land that grows again. This is how renewal takes root. This is how Israel rebuilds after war. Join us in restoring the North and strengthening the future of the land of Israel. Go now to tbn.org/rebuildisrael. Again, that's tbn.org/rebuildisrael, or call 800-804-7895. That's 800-804-7895. Plant a tree, an apple tree, in the northern communities of Israel. Bring jobs back, bring the people back, despite the threats of the terrorists to our borders. Now let's get back to the news. Kuwait International Airport was hit by an Iranian UAV attack. One person was killed. Dozens were wounded. A central terminal was shut down, and the airspace of one of the Gulf states once again entered the state of emergency. This happened hours after the Americans struck a tanker near Hormuz and after Iran tried to hit Bahrain and Kuwait with missiles and UAVs. So, are we still inside negotiations, or have we already returned to open the war in the Gulf, to an open war? This is where our second part of this report begins. Because at the beginning of the night, the Gulf was mostly talking about interceptions, missiles that were fired towards Kuwait from Iran that did not reach their targets. 3 missiles towards Bahrain that were intercepted, UAVs moving towards vessels that fell before they hit, but later the picture changed. In Kuwait, officials announced that several UAVs hit Terminal 1 at the international airport. Heavy damage was caused to the building. Flight operations were halted, and the national airline suspended activity until further notice. Later, the airport reopened partially, but the message had already reacted and reached the international region. Everybody in the region knows about it. Iran is not satisfied with threatening military bases. It is ready to strike a sensitive civilian junction in the heart of an Arab country that did not ask to become a battlefield. In Bahrain, officials said that the air defensive systems intercepted and destroyed 3 UAVs. Qatar and other Gulf states condemned the attack and expressed solidarity with Kuwait and Bahrain. This is not only polite diplomacy. The Gulf states, they understand that they're facing a regime that's trying to use them as leverage against Washington. The Iranians presented the attack as response. The Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps claimed that the Americans had struck an oil tanker that tried to reach Iran, and that afterwards they hit one of their communications towers in the southern part of Qasem Island. In response, they announced that they had attacked with missiles and UAVs an Air Force base in the region and the headquarters of the United States 5th Fleet in Bahrain. The United States rejected that claim, saying that all attempts to hit American forces had failed. But even if some of the Iranian claims are inflated, their choice matters. Iran did not fire only in order to hit. It fired in order to tell a story. From Tehran's perspective, every American nation in Hormuz must be answered immediately. Every action the Americans take, not only against the vessels, not only against the base, but also against civilian aviation, against infrastructure, and against the sense of security of anyone hosting American forces. This is a war of perception, but it is being fought with metal, fire, and casualties. At the center of the event stands the tanker M/T Lexia, sailing under the flag of Botswana. Around midnight, U.S. Central Command announced that American forces had disabled the tanker's engines after the crew ignored the repeated warnings. An American aircraft fired a precision missile at the engine room, and the ship was stopped before continuing towards Iran. This move makes the new American line clear. The naval blockade is not only symbolic, it is being enforced. A ship that tries to break through it may be hit. If Iran wants to test the Americans through civilian vessels, foreign flags, and gray zones at sea, Washington is now trying to show that the gray area is closing. But the blockade at sea is only one layer. At the same time, the United States is also applying pressure on the money. The United States Treasury Department imposed sanctions on Nobitex, Iran's largest cryptocurrency exchange, and on senior figures connected to it. In Washington, officials say that the platform became one of the regime's central channels for bypassing sanctions, transferring money, and protecting regime assets while the Iranian economy is collapsing. This is a less photographed front, but it is no less important. A plane striking a control station on Qasem Island creates images. A sanction on cryptocurrency exchange does not create smoke in the sky, but it blocks the Revolutionary Guards from moving money, buying equipment, paying smuggling networks, and moving capital out of Iran. That's a real strategic blow. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that the regime chose to use digital asset technologies for a corrupt agenda, evading sanctions and moving wealth out of the country. According to the American statement, Nobitex handled more than half of Iran's digital asset activity last year. That is why striking it is not only technical, it is an attempt to cut off an oxygen pipe. But Iran has another oxygen pipe, and it is located in the open sea. The waters of Malaysia have, in recent years, become one of the most important hubs for Iran's shadow fleet. Dozens of miles from the coast, all tankers, some of them under sanctions, transfer oil from ship to ship. Names are covered, identification numbers are hidden, tracking systems are turned off. The cargo changes hands, changes identity, and continues on its way to private refineries in China. The numbers explain why this matters. Because according to assessments that are presented in the United States Congress, Iran earned about $31 billion last year from selling oil to China. That was close to 90% of its oil exports and almost half of the Iranian government's budget. Before the war, China imported about 1.4 million barrels of oil a day from Iran. In other words, even when Washington closes one port, and even when one ship is stopped near Hormuz, the Iranian regime is still trying to maintain a broad network of smuggling, delayed payments, and barrels of oil that are already at sea. There is also one especially troubling figure. Outside the blockade zone, there are, according to the assessments, about 90 million barrels of Iranian oil that have already left Iran's territorial waters. Some of the money for that oil may reach Tehran only months from now. That's why even a successful blockade does not work like a light switch. It does not turn off the regime in one day. It chokes slowly, and it has to be held for long enough. This is where the global energy market comes in. Saudi Arabia is already responding. Aramco raised the price of Arab light crude for the Asian market to an especially high premium. In the background, exports from the Gulf are becoming more complicated. The risks are rising, and passage through Hormuz no longer looks like a safe route. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are almost the only Gulf countries with significant export alternatives outside the Strait of Hormuz. Saudi Arabia uses a pipeline that reaches the Red Sea coast through Yanbu, and from there moves millions of barrels a day. For the viewer at home, that sounds far away. For the global economy, it's very close. When a ship is hit in Hormuz, energy prices move. When an airport in Kuwait is shut down, airliners change routes. When Saudi Arabia raises oil prices for Asia, refineries in China, India, and Japan have to recalculate the costs. And when the price of gasoline rises in the United States, the political pressure goes straight to the White House. That's why Trump is now between two fronts. On one front, he wants to show that he's not folding against Iran. On the other front, he wants a deal that opens Hormuz, reduces pressure on gasoline prices, and allows him to say that the war prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon without dragging the United States into an endless campaign. In his latest interview, Trump confirmed that he called Netanyahu crazy during a conversation about fighting in Lebanon. But immediately afterwards, he stressed that he likes Bibi very much, works with him very well, and that both of them are wartime leaders. That sentence says a lot about this movement. There is friction, there are nerves, there is American pressure on Israel, but there is no complete break. Trump is mainly concerned that the fighting in Lebanon could derail the agreement with Iran. He claims that the talks are developing quickly, that Iran agreed that it will not have a nuclear weapon, and that the Ayatollahs are also involved in the contacts. And in the same breath, he says that the economic price, even if oil is more expensive, is still small compared to the possibility that Iran could possess a nuclear weapon. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio is drawing the line more sharply. In a Senate hearing, he made clear that there will be no sanctions relief just because Iran opens Hormuz. The first condition is opening the strait. After that, Iran must commit to concrete and detailed negotiations over the fate of its highly enriched uranium. Any sanctions relief, he said, will come only in exchange for the reason of sanctions were imposed in the first place, the nuclear program. That is the difference between a ceasefire and a real deal. Opening Hormuz can calm the markets. It can reduce pressure on the White House. It can allow Kuwait, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia to breathe. But from Washington's perspective, that's not enough. The Americans want Iran to enter the talks with its conventional shield eroded, its launchers hit, its air defense systems weakened, and its economy under pressure. Just before we continue, it's important that you help us spread the truth. You can do that by hitting the subscribe button on TBN Israel, our YouTube channel, where we report twice a day about what's happening in this war, in Israel, in this region, and we need your help to share this information with the rest of the world. Now, we need to move north because Lebanon is no longer only a Lebanese story. The Americans are trying to prevent the Lebanese front from becoming a mine inside the negotiations with Iran. In Washington, contacts are taking place between Israel and Lebanon, and within that framework, a plane is being raised, which the United States military would train Lebanese army in order to strengthen it against Hezbollah and ultimately help disarm the terrorist organization. Israel supports such a move, but it is not willing to give up the freedom of action. So according to the emerging understandings, Israel will refrain from strikes in the Dahieh district of Beirut as part of the effort to prevent a broad escalation. But in southern Lebanon, inside the expanded security zone that the IDF currently holds, there is not necessarily a full restriction on the military activity. In other words, Washington is trying to put a ceiling on the war, not to stop Israel completely. An American official explained the logic simply. Trump wants to prevent escalation, so Lebanon does not become a central issue in the negotiations with Iran. And that is exactly the problem. Iran wants to turn Lebanon into a central issue. From Tehran's perspective, Hezbollah is a strategic asset. If the Americans sign a regional agreement, Iran wants to make sure that asset is not crushed by Israel while Iran itself is sitting at the table. That's why Tehran is trying to connect Hormuz, the nuclear issue, sanctions, Lebanon, and perhaps later also Gaza. Some in Israel are warning against a dangerous picture. Iran lost important points militarily, but it is trying to win politically through the Americans. It is trying to dictate end-of-the-war terms in the Gulf, restrain Israel in Lebanon, and preserve Hezbollah as an armed force inside the Lebanese state. This has to be said carefully. It is not a done deal. This is a campaign that is still underway, but it is clear that as the talks with Iran progress, every Israeli action in Lebanon is also examined through the eyes of the White House. Every strike in the Dahieh neighborhood could become a crisis with Trump. Every Hezbollah launch into northern Israel could bring Israel back into the field. And every Iranian message about the violation of the ceasefire on all fronts is meant exactly for this, to make Hezbollah part of the price of an American-Iranian deal. From Israel's perspective, that's a dangerous line, because a ceasefire does not dismantle Hezbollah capabilities. If that's happening, it's not a solution. And if during the pause, Hezbollah rebuilds its UAV array, the Radwan force, its firing positions, and its control rooms, then in a few months, Israel may meet the same threat again, only under worse diplomatic conditions. And that is why Israel is insisting on two things at the same time. not to appear as a side blowing up the American move, but also not to give Hezbollah immunity in the name of the negotiations with Iran. And that brings us back to the Gulf. The event in Kuwait shows what happens when Iran feels that it can raise the regional price. It does not have to defeat the United States directly. It's enough for it to hit airports, scare the shipping companies, spike energy prices, and push Arab states to pressure Washington to reach an agreement faster. The American response shows the other side. Washington is not satisfied with talks. It is striking tankers, control stations, cryptocurrency exchanges, the shadow fleet, and every mechanism that allows the regime to hold on. This is no longer a war on one line. This is a war at sea, on the air, in banks, in crypto, in oil, in Lebanon, and in the negotiating rooms. Every arena affects the other. A UAV in Kuwait can affect the price of gasoline in America. A strike in Lebanon can affect the nuclear talks. A sanction on the cryptocurrency exchange can affect the ability of the Revolutionary Guards to pay their proxies. And that is exactly what makes this moment so dangerous. Because every side wants to show it is in control, but the entire system is already full of ignition points. One failed interception is enough. One missile hitting an unintended place is enough. One difficult conversation between Washington and Jerusalem is enough. One Iranian move through Hezbollah or through Hormuz is enough. And the entire negotiation can collapse within hours. The war has not stopped. It has simply split into more arenas, more pressure, and more decisions that have to be made quietly and quickly. And the question now is who will manage to hold out longer? Iran under blockade, Trump under pressure, or Israel, which is required to fight, but also not to blow up the agreement that is forming above its head. So keep spreading the truth. Follow us, and most importantly, don't forget to click on the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to what's happening in Israel, boots on the ground style. Keep looking for us, Yair, Pinto, and Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms. And the best thing that you can do when you don't know what to do is to pray. So unite in prayer for the situation, for God to give wisdom to our leaders, for the IDF soldiers, for the U.S. personnel, for everybody, for the children. Pray for the family unit of the IDF soldiers, because it's very hard to go to fight for so long. And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.